Hello, good day, greetings, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining True Hope Cast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. True Hope Cast takes a deep dive into mental health's many psychological and physiological aspects. This is the show for you if you're looking for motivation, inspiration, knowledge, and solutions. That is really what we're all about here at True Hope Canada. True Hope Canada is a mind and body-based supplement company dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, you can visit truehopecanada.com. Today on the show, I welcome Lincoln Stoller. Lincoln is a quantum physicist, neuropsychologist, hypnotherapist, clinical counsellor, psychonaut, mountaineer, author and educator. He combines science, spirit and economics by applying an understanding of hard science to imagination, psyche and the behaviour of groups. Today on the show, we are going to be discussing ego, culture and the subconscious. Enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the show, Lincoln. Thank you so much for being with us today. How are you? What is going well?
Thank you. What is going well? Well, I always have several projects on my front burner, and most of them are very long-term projects, so they sort of go up and down. The ones that are going well, well, I'm doing some more marketing. Marketing is a funny thing. It's so elusive. And I've been thinking about what your topics are and how I would approach it, but you're going to have to help me target in on the listener because I tell you, my background is both scientific and experiential, which is to say I like to get my hands dirty in whatever it is I'm involved with. And I like to, more than study it, I like to research it and sort of go beyond the bleeding edge.
All
So
right.
with, brain science, psychology, therapy, and I don't know what you want to call it. Now we're getting into delicate terrain like spirituality. So, yeah, things are interesting.
All right, that's great. Well, as an introduction, why don't you just let the audience know, let me know a little bit more about who you are and what it is that you do, please.
Well, you'd think that would be an easy question, but it's of course not. Um, Let me start with the present and work backwards. I'm a therapist now, clinical counselor. Um, I work mostly with sort of thoughtful, older people who are either in control or trying to regain control, as opposed to people who are, seriously disabled, as in schizophrenia or something like that. Though I've worked well with those people too, I'm also very interested in medical issues, physical, somatic. So, stepping back in time, I am a hypnotherapist, and that's sort of a wild frontier. And stepping back again, I spent a decade doing brain training, neurofeedback, which is its own story, not very well integrated with medicine or psychology or neurology, but it touches on all of those. And I'm very interested and involved in that whole field. And stepping back again, I was a kind of a world traveler, and I experienced many altered state experiences, both culturally and ceremonially. So I was pretty involved with the ayahuasca phenomena, which is Central and Southern America, in many places, facilitated by many people. And it was actually studying the brainwaves of people in trance and under the influence of psychedelics that got me into the brainwave training. And stepping back again, I spent 20 years as a software developer running a company that designed custom accounting databases. Designed, installed, produced, maintained. supported, trained. And stepping back again, I have a PhD in physics, quantum systems. And stepping back again, I was an astronomer with a wonderful guy um, who got me a job at NASA as a undergraduate, and one of my several, great mentors. And stepping back one last time, I spent 10 years, about mountaineering, which had a very important formative influence both on my character and my ability to understand people, because it's both an extreme state that it puts you in, and you meet some pretty extreme people. So that, the wrap up is I have a PhD in quantum physics and a certification as a hypnotherapist and another certification as a clinical counselor. And I'm writing a lot of books, and the books I'm working on now are trying to integrate brain training, altered state experience, which is sort of coming in as psychedelics. It's popular these days, but certainly not the only altered state approach to insight, and what you might call coaching. I haven't found a good word for it, but enabling people to be aware of and in possession of their faculties. So that brings us back to the present.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I love the fact that you've gone backwards there. I think that's a great practice. Um, Tell me, the like done a bunch of things with the neurofeedback work, the brain training work. Are you able to complement all those different practices with the current like counseling that you do now, um, as a practitioner?
I try. I can somewhat. I'm limited in some ways. Um, the most obvious limitation is technical, because the most effective brain training is done with a amplifying device on your scalp. And the technology has been bouncing around. It's almost affordable and practical, but not quite. I'm still stepping out from the legacy hardware, which used what are called wet contacts, which sort of glue to your head with this conductive peanut butter paste, which requires somebody to apply them at certain sites on your scalp, which means you have to see the person in person, and there's a certain delay in, tuning the equipment. It's almost like I feel like I'm in a computer age with radio tubes when it comes to doing EEG feedback with wet contact. And so now there's developing a dry contact technology, and there have been, the Muse is popular, but not very good, I hear, and some others. And of course, if you want quality, you have to spend money, and I'm trying to move into that. The problem is that people don't want to pay for it because, well, first of all, the equipment is expensive, and it takes time on my part to record, analyze, and train. But mostly people don't understand what it does for them. And so they don't appreciate the value. And it's this is sort of my big thing, and we'll probably talk about this today, is that we're trained to look for what I might call reductive results, definitive, objective, measurable results when we assess anything. And certainly that applies when we assess our investment in time and mental health and progress. Um, and if you everywhere you look, you see measures that are discernible and measurable, like money and profits and progress and things like this. But brain training doesn't give you that. It's a very subtle, very deep um, process of synchronizing yourself. And the typical result of people who do brain training is that they don't notice anything. And if they do, or when they do, they ascribe it to the world. They say, oh, it's been a better day, or people have talked to me more nicely today, or I'm in a better mood. They don't really you can't really see it happening because it underlies your thoughts and awareness. So when you ask somebody to invest in it, they kind of want to know what they're getting out of it, and you have to kind of dance around. But to get to your question, I do try to integrate it. Um, and I'm trying to integrate it at a less technical level, which of course is cheaper and more available, to get people to focus on the process of awareness. I'm going to leave it there because I could
Cool.
go on.
No, that's very, very interesting. And I just wonder, like, where are we in regards to the current technology with amplifying technology and um, being able to look at the what the brain is doing in regards to frequency or wave or however you analyze it. But like, where are we at in regards to that technology for like normal everyday individuals? I mean, you mentioned that some people don't want to invest the money because they probably don't understand exactly what the technology is doing and what the results mean. Um, but like, what can we actually learn from this current technology, and how do you go about explaining that to people? Because you made a great point in regards to, like, we love this like reductionist idea of looking at test results and this and that and this and that. We want simplicity, but sometimes it's just not the case, and you need to be working with a very trained technician to be able to analyze the brain waves and brain frequency. So kind of like, where are we in regards to the technology that's primarily available, and yeah, like, what can we actually learn from, if we were to take the time and spend the money and spend the energy to look at where we're at? Like, what can we actually learn from the results?
It depends on what you look at. It's as complicated as the human body, which is as complicated as the human mind, though obviously different. So if you look at certain diseases, there's opportunities. Um, so basically, your brain is a regulatory organ. It's more involved with regulating things, and it's very involved with regulating itself so that it can perceive, cognize, and respond correctly. But it's also involved with the body, doing all those things for the body. So if you've got certain issues that are more sensitive to your bodies, such as anxiety, and anxiety tends to manifest in skin issues, so not always, but skin issues, bowel issues, um, muscle issues, and other things may manifest in different organs depending on how far afield you have to go, whether you're going to Chinese medicine or Western medicine. So with people who have certain issues, brain training can do other things. What's still problematic is using it diagnostically and medicinally. There have been a few physical disabilities where brain training is immediately helpful, such as epilepsy. So that makes sense because epilepsy is like a storm in your brain, and if you could solve that, you could have great progress, and in fact, you can. But it's also a complicated issue, and your brain is not a simple thing. So the limits of progress are circumscribed. Um, if you have anxiety, anxiety is largely a cognitive thing. Certainly, there are outside forces, but it's how you respond. And if you're chronically anxious, that's a different problem from if you have, money problems, which are physical and external. So, here we get to the point of how does a person understand that they have different aspects to their condition, some of which they can work on through different means. So, the things that are becoming popular, trying to get to your answer, are, um, fortunately or unfortunately, more measurable things. So, calmness, anxiety is fitting in with meditation, mindfulness, and yoga. These are sort of popular trends in Western society. And you sort of do need popular trends because that's how people start thinking about things. Using brain training in the 20 years ago, it was harder to develop an understanding with my clients because I'd have to sort of get them in the mindful yoga meditative frame of mind if they weren't. And not everybody gets into that frame of mind. So you'll see right now devices that are offered on one of these platforms. Mindfulness, helping you sleep, um, in conjunction with your yoga practice or your meditative practice. And what they're doing is basically the same thing as what anxiety training for neurofeedback would do. That's not as simple as it sounds, because there's really, even this is a simplification, two levels to anxiety. One is vigilance, which is rapid and elevated response, and the other is breadth of awareness, which is memory and calmness and relaxation. And we have to have both, right? You want to be able to respond to the fire alarm. That's not a bad thing. You just don't want to be in a hair trigger all the time. And you want to access older memories, older feelings, and older thoughts. So they're sort of two directions. One is high frequency, the anxiety and the vigilance, and the other is low frequency, the memories and the thoughts and the relaxation. So if you use brain training in that simple model, it fits in well with meditation, mindfulness, relaxation, sleep, maybe altered state work. That's still very new. We're not sure how that's going to play out. And then the price is still not low enough for what people expect. So the price is, I mean, it's coming down, as we speak. You can get a Muse headset for between $100 and $300, depending on what model and whether it's used. And then the better headsets are starting to be rented for $30 a month, but purchased for $400. These are dry sensors now, so that you can put them on yourself. And in the US, they're under another cloud that they can't be sold as medical devices without being subject to strict control and liability, so that they're not sold as medical devices. They're sold as relaxation. I mean, you're sort of in this nutraceutical, non-medical area, and there is that line between claiming to do something medical and not.
Yeah.
So they're not claiming to do anything medical, which is sort of safe, but it also means that there's no research into the medical direction with these devices, because that broaches the boundary of so forth. And
Interesting, yeah.
and that prevents our progress somewhat.
When it comes to energy waves, brain frequency, because I feel like most people don't do a good job with understanding things that they can't like physically see or understand. Like I can look at a blood
Absolutely.
test and analyze it and have a look at it and get basically just get my doctor's opinion. And if it's outside of a normal range, then I might bring some attention to it. But we don't do very well with understanding things that are like happening internally. And obviously we're all bound to, the same laws when it comes to everything emitting an energy, a frequency. It's kind of like all there, but yeah, we don't do very well with understanding those types of like mysterious types of things, especially when so much of the brain and the body is just yet to be understood, and probably won't be. But like, what's commonly misunderstood about I'm going to use the word energy and frequency that is happening within every cell of our bodies, down to the smallest organelles, or whatever you want to describe. But like, what do we commonly misunderstand about something that we all have, we all share, it's absolutely there, but the understanding is so unconventional that we don't really like talk about it or understand?
I think the question is a culturally relative question, and I have to approach it, or have approached it. I have no other way to approach it culturally, which is to say, I use what I know about brainwaves and the sort of scientific experiments done with them for whatever it can reveal to me, and I take basically, I don't know. I've found traditional Chinese medicine useful, though I say that as I'm not a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, so I can say that with ignorance, you know. Um, the idea of energy in your body and energy systems. Let me be more specific. So I'm trying to use the tools I have to approach that question. And the way I'm doing it is I'm saying I'm using the tool of hypnotherapy, which opens up that whole Pandora's box, and I'll have to define what I mean. What I mean by hypnotherapy is a focused awareness on something, and what people think is it means you're spaced out and you're somnambulistic or you're in asleep or something, but those are just symptoms that an observer sees of somebody who's deeply focused. You can be so focused that you're not aware of what's going on around you, but that's not the point. The point is what you're focused on, not what you're not focused on. So yeah, you're not focused on what's happening around you, and you may do silly things because you're asked to. But what's important is where have you gone? So what I'm trying to do in that regard is getting people to go to their organs or their systems or their energy systems. And I'm trying to get them to focus on whatever little somatic clues we have as to what these systems are doing. And I'm talking about, well, it's hard to say what I'm talking about. I'm not exactly talking about a physical organ. I'm talking about your awareness of it. So I'm not exactly talking about the liver. And, what awareness do we have of our liver? Well, in Western medicine, not much awareness, that is to say, subjective awareness. But in Eastern medicine, a lot, because it's not entirely the organ, it's the energy. And again, it's what I say, it's cultural. You have to sort of learn to think in the way that the liver is a detoxifying organ and your life has toxic, energetic influences. And now you can start to think in terms of energetic toxicity. You're not really thinking in terms of your liver. Now you're an energetic concept. And so this I think I can approach with hypnosis and say, okay, let's bring up your awareness of toxicity. And now let's try to put it into your liver or see if we can do something liver-like about it. But I don't really care. I'm really trying to get a result. Whatever your result is, because I think the Eastern approach may be more suitable to the mentalization. Let me give you this easily gets lost in the unknown terminology. So let me be more specific with something I'm personally dealing with. So I had COVID, like many people did, and I had COVID twice. And the second time was last November, almost a year ago, well, 11 months ago. And it put me in the hospital with collapsed lung. And, the as we all should know, the doctors they just didn't know what to do, and they weren't free to speculate, and they were constrained by, in this country, Canada, the government's protocols. So they weren't very helpful. They were vigilant, putting me on various measuring machines and taking x-rays and so forth. But they weren't very helpful. Um, and it was not very reassuring to be under their care. They said you might die. Well, gee, thanks. Um, uh, so what I'm left with in the sort of long COVID experience is uh, what I would call impaired lung function. And I say that because I'm not really sure where the impairment is. It seems to be upper respiratory. But I must say, Canada is really great at putting you into the system, and you grind along very slowly through all the tools the system has to offer. So I have a pulmonologist who is watching over me, and not to be too negative, but I would say doing absolutely nothing for whatever reason. I'm supposed to talk to him, I think today, in fact, and I'm questioning whether I should ask him, "Is it true that you know nothing about my condition?" But then that would be too negative, and whether it's true or not, it's not going to be helpful. So I'm going to ask him or tell him about this experience, which is that I've felt that my lungs can't fully respire, as if they were obstructed, but I don't have asthma, and my lung capacity is high, above normal, but they don't seem to be functioning well. And yesterday, for one of the first times, I've started running again. which I had been doing before COVID. And the result of that running was that my lungs really reacted with spasms and mucus and so forth and so on. And I thought, great, I've done something that gets a result. Now my body is pushing a boundary. And that is much more hopeful than the body not doing anything at all and just remaining incapacitated. So now I think I understand. And what I'm trying to focus on is the energies. Uh, and it's very easy to be, it's at some level very easy to do that. So if you're coughing, you can say, "Oh, damn, I feel awful. I'm getting nervous. I don't know what's happening to me. Am I going downhill?" And you get more vigilant and more anxious. And on the opposite, which I'm doing, I think successfully, is I'm saying, "Oh, great. I'm coughing. I'm spasming. My muscles are relearning how to be more effective and how to deal with other stresses and be more efficient in pulmonary function." So I see it as a positive thing, and every time I cough or sneeze or have a spasm, I think, "Oh, great, calm down, try to process, try to get back in the flow," and I'm already within 24 hours feeling more functional. So I can work with a person if I was my client. Well, I am in some extent, but not in the real sense where I have resistance. So my work as a therapist with a client is usually to overcome resistance, some worry, anxiety, hesitancy, barrier is something that I can help them overcome. Of course, I'm doing it for myself. I don't know if it's easier or harder, but with another person, you have to get in their head and see what it is that's bothering them, develop some rapport, some trust. And then we get back to the cultural thing, like, can you talk to them in terms they understand? And if they're looking at a direct improvement, well, what are they? We're looking at sort of blood tests or pulmonary function. And you're working on, and you're doing energy work. You have to sort of convert them to think in your terms, or try anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, wait. Uh, so that was my example of doing energy work on myself. And I hope you could understand how I might try to do that on someone else, whether it was COVID, lung function, liver function, or whatever. You can at least imagine that I would take a person into a realm where they might be sensitive to things they were not aware of, and get them to be patient enough not to look for dramatic results. Because if you're in a lost world, which is to say, into your body, and you are lost in that world, you can't expect dramatic results at first. In fact, you ought to expect and ought to cherish being lost in a new place, a new territory. Um, what do you think about that?
I think that's very interesting. A big thing that come up for me is like, how do you go about explaining to somebody you're working with when you're doing maybe like hypnotherapy work and you're allowing them, and putting them in a position to become like hyper focused on a particular organ that's causing them issues? Let's just say the lung, for example, because in your case, you were saying like, you didn't have asthma, you didn't have any like clear, let's say, conventional pathology that was like causing your symptoms, but like energetically there's like clearly something like going on there. Like, how would you explain to somebody who is working on becoming more focused on that particular organ, and how their body is responding to that focus, and in creating not like a better energy, but like, I think of it as like, if I have like lower back pain, for example, and I've got the ability and the time to sit down and maybe meditate and start scanning my body and thinking about that pain and bringing my awareness and my consciousness to that particular area, I feel that I am engaging in my body's healing response and putting that energy in that particular type of area. That's how like I would overcome like some sort of like injury. How would you go about explaining that like energy piece to people? Because again, like with like energy medicine or energy healing, like a lot of people, if they don't understand it a little bit, understand the science behind it, then their eyes are going to roll immediately, and they're not going to put their awareness on what you're saying, and because they just don't have that, they just don't have any understanding of it, because their conventional ideas of symptoms, diagnosis, drug, surgery, whatever, like that's kind of like the clear path that we've been put on, and like thinking about things with like
Okay.
energy.
Stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Okay.
Stop,
Sorry.
Simon.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay.
You're caught in a vortex there, the vortex of the unknown. There are three answers. One is that you work with whatever the person can feel. So you amplify it. So, one of the typical hypnosis things is like, if you have pain, then imagine that you can make the pain worse by focusing on it. And if you can make it worse, then you can make it better. So now imagine that you make it less. So you're playing with it. It's almost like loosening a nut and a bolt by rocking it back and forth. So become aware, become less aware, become more aware, become less aware. In that way, explore your own limits of awareness. That's one. Two is I give them some mystical mumbo jumbo and confuse them to the point where they start thinking creatively. That's really the point. So, I talk physics or neurology, or I talk traditional Chinese medicine, or whatever they don't know about but think is important.
Mm-hmm.
And then I either authentically or imaginatively take them to think about it in new ways, like what if they could combine, this and that. And I try to get them in a confused state where they drop their preconceptions.
Nice.
So, so answer one was I explore what they think and feel to accelerate, amplify it. Answer two is I get them to a state where they drop their preconceptions and start to not only feel novelty, but think and emote in novel ways, so that they can start building connections, or I should say, so that connections start being built. It's not clear whose intention is really operating here. And the third way, which is most interesting, I think, is I take them into hypnosis and I do guided visualizations, and they say something to the effect, imagine that a person is appearing who represents your pain or whatever, trouble, anxiety. And, let's explore. It could be a person or an environment. And so a person is in hypnosis now, which means they're very focused, almost in a dream state. And sometimes if people resist that, they'll think, oh, what am I doing here? I'm making this up. And, you deal with that. People, they got to go through that. Not everybody does. Some people do. Other people, drop into it very easily, and they just start flowing along. And what happens in that state, sooner or later, is that things start showing up. People, places, objects, memories, associations, and you encourage it into form. What color is it? What shape is it? What face does it have? What voice does it have? And what happens is, usually, they find themselves confronting something they didn't expect, and they don't know what to do. So it could be a person from their past, it could be an entity, it could be an animal, whatever. People, I say they build this. Some people say these energies exist out there. I don't care. And then what I'll do is I'll say, okay, let me be the intermediary. Let me talk to them. Let me tell you what to do. Now go into that purple haze or that brilliant light, or we tell a story, and now you're going to die, or now you're going to live, or whatever. And I watch them, and I'm looking for them to have an epiphany and a connection. So here's a simple example. I had a client dealing with weight loss issues. So they had body image issues. And through this process of imagining and creating and evoking, they established contact with a beautiful image of themselves that could speak to them and tell them how good they were. I mean, this person that they created, evoked, would tell them how good and capable and self-accepting they were. Not me. And that was tremendously useful, because now they had a connection with their own self-loving self, which is, something I might have led them to, sort of. But they felt it was theirs. They took responsibility and they had the connection and they didn't need me anymore. And I felt that that person, that entity, that creation or reality, it's no less real than whoever they thought they were, would help them more than anything anyone could do. Lead
How
them.
much does like somebody's own ego get in the way of some of the progression to that type of place? Because that's a very it's a very progressive place to be when if you were kind of settling down and putting yourself in a position to be spoken to like that and be connected with something outside of them. That's a really powerful place to be in. How much does like our own ego get in the way of even coming to even thinking about being in a place like that?
It differs with each individual. You have to understand your ego is another regulatory organ, if you will, regulatory process. And its job is to help you to respond to the world. So, depending on what your world is throwing at you and what you've learned in terms of how to respond, it can be more or less in your way. Um, in extreme forms, it's very in your way. You're highly responsive, or I should say reactive, and you're quick to impose an understanding on things. I mean, that's an ego thing. It's thoughtful, conscious, intentional. And it can be obstructive. There are other people who are very loose and laid back and sometimes slow or expansive or receptive or empathetic. And that can be an opportunity, but it can also be a risk. You wouldn't want to be that kind of person in a war zone. In a war zone, you would want to, we say PTSD is being overreactive, but it's not overreactive if you're surrounded by landmines. It's entirely appropriate. Mm-hmm. It's just that when you're no longer surrounded by landmines, you have to then realize that and not continue in that mode. So I think the question is not exactly as you phrased it as to how much the ego is a problem, but the question is how flexible is your ego? Can you adjust it properly? It's like saying, should a car be revved at high revolutions or low revolutions? Well, it depends on what you're trying to do. We have gears, but we also have, the gas pedal. And if you get in your car and it's either idling or your foot's on the floor, then that's great if you're doing drag racing. But for the most part, it's dysfunctional. So that's where I would focus, is not on the question of if or what your ego is doing for you, but whether you can control it, whether you can manage it. And now we're talking about brain function again.
Totally, yeah, fascinating stuff. What have you seen? How have you seen people's? What have you seen people learn when they're connecting to more of their spiritual side, especially for those people who have never even contemplated spirituality as a part of their self?
I use my father as the example. He was a fairly highly driven, a fairly unspiritual person, and he would always say, navel gazing was of no use. He sort of put it in those pejorative terms, and I would say, it's funny. I've had much more useful conversations with him now that he's been dead 10 years than I ever did when he was alive. I say to him, everything you do is based on your sense of purpose and commitment. And if you have no purpose and you're committed to nothing, life doesn't mean much and you'll have trouble putting energy into things. So I would say I would translate spirituality. It's one of those terms that either you know it and it's useful or you don't know it and it's not useful. I would translate it into practical terms by saying it's your sense of commitment and purpose. I think even the most materialistic person can get on board with that. Even if you get down to, being actuarial, it's like return on investment and assets at risk. So, in the most fundamental materialistic level, spirituality is a deeper understanding of your assets at risk. And you can't be too, although it sounds like, very measured and reductive, you can't be too reductive when you're considering risk, because risk is by definition pretty much all the things you're not thinking about. Um, I've had many people who died in avalanches. They're a great example of risk, because you just, they're like the monster under the bed. Avalanches happen on calm, low slopes. They don't happen on steep, dangerous slopes. And you have to be aware of every. They happen on bright, sunny days, on nice, gentle slopes. And if you don't know that, that's when you're in danger. And that's where, all my friends have been killed, on nice, gentle slopes on nice, sunny days. So that's a kind of spirituality. It's a deeper understanding of what's happening beyond the things your ego looks at. I mean, does that help you?
Certainly, certainly. And something that you said really spoke to me in regards to purpose and commitment to something. And it makes me feel, when I think of like a great large group of our youth seem to have a huge lack of purpose and seem to have a huge lack of commitment to anything. And like, I tried to look back at myself as an 18, 19, 20-year old, and I can't really recall too much of what was going on in regards to my purpose and my own levels of commitment to something. But like, when it comes to having responsibility or teaching children responsibility, I think we're doing a huge disservice to them within schools and maybe even at home as well. So I just wonder what your opinion is in regards to that, like being able to connect to your spiritual side of your purpose and your commitment. Like, maybe we're just stemming so far away from the capability of being in that type of spiritual place, because we're breeding a group of people to not really have purpose and not really have commitment on like a strong level, I think, anyway.
I entirely agree. I think it's a social problem and a personal problem. I'm totally anti-teacher and anti-school, positive on learning and mentorship. And I think the answer to the question is, unless you have dramatic, personal, committed experiences, you don't change. And if you could translate what we call education into, personal, committed, whatever, personal, whatever, purposeful, you'd have an education that was meaningful. And as long as you don't, you're just training people. And I think it's fair to look, the history of education is mostly in training. 300 years ago, people weren't trained much at all for anything. They learned what was in their environment. They learned how to make barrels and shoe horses. And, come with the last 100 years, we've become an industrial society, and we've needed people to have specialized skills. And so we've trained them. But that doesn't make a person aware, in control of their ego. Uh, it almost limits them. Well, it does limit them. So that's why I'm anti-teacher, because I understand a teacher as somebody who trains you. And I think you can get your own training once you have purpose and commitment, especially in this age, where there's very rapidly more resources available for learning. Let me just say, when I think about my youth, I am lucky to have one experience that was a landmark watershed for me, that was indicative of coming to commitment. And once I came to commitment, kind of the world changes for me. It changed for me. And then it became much more revolutionary and reactionary and insistent and in control of myself. And that experience was when I decided to go rock climbing with a friend. And we took a rope and we went out to the cliffs, and we put the rope on, and I headed up the cliff. And I was about 150 feet up. This is 15 stories. And I looked down and I said, holy shit, I have no idea what I'm doing. And I have done nothing to protect myself. And all of a sudden, it's not so easy. And I had a choice. I could freak out and die, or I could get control of myself and say, this is a situation. We have a situation here. What are you going to do about it? And I was never afraid of heights after that. But, it was an epiphany. It was not safe. It was definitely not safe, and that is the danger. If you're going to really enable people to learn, they have to be able to take some risk. You'd like it not to be fatal, and definitely that's true, especially not killing other people. But there is a real risk, and you know, if you go back to traditional cultures, they did manage that with you know, coming of age ceremonies and other things. Sometimes they made it seem more dramatic than it was. But I think this is the answer to your question.
Certainly, yeah. I think the big word that came out to me with what you were saying there is about risk, and we have created kind of a culture that's like, you don't take risks, you don't take chances, be that with your physical self, your mental self, or whatever that might be. And yeah, we have a very, very comfortable, most people have a very comfortable reality in regards to where you wouldn't have to take those types of risks to kind of figure out like your limits and put yourself in those kind of scary, traumatic situations where you have to, yeah, you have to make a choice in the moment to kind of overcome the emotional
Exactly.
sympathetic self, I suppose. And once you realize that you're able to do that in really traumatic circumstances, you become super powerful then, because you can do them in the minor stresses that come up in your life, and you can really take control of those things, and you can start to, develop yourself, develop your brain, develop your nervous system to respond to, which is quite frequently a very stressful world. And yeah, I love the rites of passage that we would have traditionally have that just do not exist anymore. We have like 35-year-old man boys out there who have never taken that transitional period in their teens to, whether that's to just have a job, or to, do something a little bit more like nature bound or something. I'm not sure what it is. There's a million ways to
Right.
do. I've got a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I'm trying to figure out in the next 10 years how I can help them transition from recognizing that they're no longer a child and they're turning into a young man, which comes with responsibilities. It comes with a role. And, for me as a 15-year-old, my dad told me I need to get, if I wanted to start, if I wanted to continue playing golf and doing these fun things, I had to get a job to start financing that myself. And that was like, wow, okay, I didn't realize that was ever going to have to happen, but obviously it had to. And I had that responsibility, and I had a role in the family. I had this role at this job, which taught me all of these. I worked at McDonald's when I was 15 years of age. It wasn't a luxurious job, that's for sure. But I was doing ridiculous hours. I was pushing my mind and my body in these like weird circumstances, and I had this role. And it was just interesting how much that like taught me. Even like 25 years later on, it's still teaching me that the power of having a responsibility and having a role, having a direction, having a purpose, and having a commitment to something. And then when things like, a wife and kids turn up, you're slightly more prepared to deal with the madness that endures. And it's yeah, it's quite powerful. I just really struggle to see where in the school setting they are preparing kids for life, which is difficult and hard and sympathetically engaging a lot of the time.
Okay. Our time is short. I have a couple of things to say. I have some books on education which you should look at, and anyone should look at who's interested in that. It started out as one book, and it's now three books. I think I'm finished. If you go to my website, you can find it under books. My website is mindstrengthbalance.com. Mindstrengthbalance.com. The books are called The Learning Project and Becoming Super Genius, volumes 1 and 2. That is to say, you're becoming super genius, not me. And um, we can go into those another time. It is totally a topic of its own. The other thing I want to say, and I'm taking the lead here, so you can just dragging you along, is that for people who are listening to understand the topic we're talking about, energy medicine, health, and mindfulness, the simplest thing I can say is that you have to understand your mind, that your responsibility to your mind is the same as your responsibility to your body. You have to pay attention to it. You have to see what it's telling you, listen to it, and respond to your mind in the way that you respond to your body. You can't just go along egotistically thinking it's all about your intention and your reaction to things. Your mind is a way to regulate your awareness, not simply control your awareness. And so you have to tune it. That could mean learning, it could mean awareness, it could mean health, somatizing, exercising, everything. Never see an opportunity, never see a crisis without seeing an opportunity. And yeah, as I wanted to tell people that I have a blog they can sign up for, and please do. You get a free digital book. We didn't even talk about dreams and sleep and all that stuff, but there you go.
Thank you, Lincoln. I think we can get you back on the show. I'd love to talk more about your books. I've actually got some interesting questions in regards to the illustrations and the front covers there, especially in this rites of passage book. That I'd be interested to learn a little bit more about why those images are attached to those particular types of books. But if you're interested, we can get you back on the show. But you said your website is mindstrengthbalance.com. So I can make sure that is in the show notes so people can connect with you, and your blog is on there and people can connect with that free resource.
Yeah, mindstrengthbalance.com. There's a sign up sheet, and it's a free monthly blog. You can pay for weekly installments if you're interested. And I narrate them on podcasts, and I'd love to have you as a subscriber. Please check it out.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure those in the show notes. But Lincoln, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and going through some very fascinating topics. I look forward to speaking with you again in the future. But thank you so much for today.
And thank you for hosting me, Simon.
Of course. Well, that is it for this episode of True Hope Podcast, the official podcast of True Hope Canada. If you've yet to subscribe, please consider doing so. But that's it for this week. We'll see you soon.